I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
On May 25th, 1961, John Kennedy spoke as President of the United States. July 25th, 1969, the President was Richard Nixon.
I was thinking, as you know, as you came down, and we knew it was a success, and it had only been 8 days, just a week, a long week, that this is the greatest week in the history of the world since the creation.
Between those two speeches, the United States learned how to send a man to the moon. It took 8 years and 2 months. It took that long to devise the means to send men to the moon and bring them back after a flight of 8 days, and have them do it with such precision that after that journey they were a mere 44 seconds ahead of schedule. It cost the United States the lives of 3 earlier astronauts incinerated in a launch pad accident. It cost them $24,000 million, enough to drive an expressway 6 lanes wide straight across Australia, enough to build about 2.5 million homes.
60 seconds and counting. This is the last minute before blastoff. 2 minus 1 minute and counting.
Apollo was indeed the most expensive exploration that man has ever made. It was said by some that most of the tasks that men could perform on the moon could be done just as easily by machines. But man has yet to vacate his right to see for himself and do for himself. And so 3 men, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Edward Aldrin, known as Buzz, were chosen. Chosen for the most incredible journey, the loneliest journey that man has yet contrived.
We just passed the 25-second mark in the count. 20 seconds, all aspects, we are still go at this time. T-minus 15, 14, 13.
Apollo 11 was a mighty beast. Sitting on the launch pad, it weighed nearly 6.5 million pounds. It was 36 stories high. 2.5 hours before blastoff, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins entered a lift in the gantry beside Apollo, took it to the top, and settled in. The final checks began. It was a hot morning in Florida. At Cape Kennedy, sitting in seat 32, row E of the press stand, was reporter Derryn Hinch of the Sydney Sun and MBS News. The last moments ticked by.
It's hard to believe that this is really it. It's now right. It's just over 3 minutes, and 3 men will actually go to the moon. I know we've talked about it for so long, and I guess millions of words have been written about this day, but it's still almost impossible to believe that right out there in front of me there are 3 men strapped into their seats at the top of that huge rocket. And I mean, it's a really huge rocket, and it'll send them where man's never been before. It's now 3 minutes and 25 seconds before blastoff. The astronauts went on board at 9 o'clock your time, and they spent their final 2.5 hours checking out all the systems. I saw them leave their quarters and head for the launch pad a while ago, and frankly, except for their Buck Rogers outfits, you'd never have known that these brave men were actually going to the moon. If you had a look at the crowd, though, you could have seen what a serious business it was. The astronauts themselves were waving and giving the thumbs up sign, and they were smiling, but some people revealed the true emotion that shadows this whole shot. They were crying, and I'll have to admit that when the door to the van closed behind those men, and they drove off for the last time before they come back, a shiver went down my spine too. I've been here since around midnight. We had to come out that early because it was the traffic is so bad that you couldn't have got out here otherwise, and we're scared we'd miss the whole shot. There are more than 1 million people watching the shot, according to the Department of Defense, and the tempo's really picked up in the last hour or so. It gets you right in the pit of the stomach now. It really does. You can feel it. The people now are lining up. Even all the journalists, who've seen a heck of a lot of big stories. Nothing can beat this one, and I doubt that there's a person who could be cynical enough to say that it's just another rocket. It really is the big one. I'm sitting here under the open sun in a sort of a press stand, which is 3 miles across the water from the rocket, and the sun's really beating down on us. I guess it's close to 100 degrees now. In fact, it's so hot I can hardly hold the telephone receiver, and you've got 3,500 very sweaty journalists down here at the moment, I can tell you. It's 1 minute and 1 second. We're going into the final countdown on man's flight to the moon, and it's just absolutely incredible here. The rocket is just raring to go. It's 50 seconds now until man takes off on this flight, and frankly, I just can hardly describe to you the excitement and the tension and the feeling of goose pimples that, well, this time we're really going, and it starts a whole new phase of man's life. It's down to 31 seconds, 30 seconds. We've got so little time now before we finally take off. It'll lift off very slowly at first. Ignition will come at 8 seconds probably, and there are these big sort of brake things which will hold it down until we get to 0, and then it will take off very slowly, so slowly you think it's going to fall over. Now 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, we have the ignition sequence, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and the flames, you can see them now, and she's ready to go. It's starting to move, and if you can hear the noise, you can probably hardly hear me, but there she goes, and it's pulling away from the tower. They're yelling, go, 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 you beaut, and now you'll hear the rumble. The stand that I'm sitting in is shaking, the lights in the stand are shaking, and there it goes. It's incredible, this huge white flame, there's smoke all around this thing. I'll just let you listen for a second to the noise. The people are on their feet now saying, go, you beauty, go, and here it comes now, this roar. And we can still see it. It's gone into a very small patch of cloud. It's going to become clear again now. Where do we go? It's firing along. It's an absolute beauty. You can still hear that sound. I know that as long as I live, I am never going to see anything quite like this one. The Americans have really done it, I have to tell you that. The smoke's clearing a bit from around the old gantry where she went from, but everything's fine. She's peering off now, and it's really on the move.
The journey to the moon, the loneliest journey, had begun. Apollo 11 sped up and out of sight. After 2.5 minutes, the first stage of the Saturn rocket, its job done, was dumped into the Atlantic Ocean. Within 3 minutes, Apollo was 40 miles high. The second stage rocket fired for about 6 minutes and carried Apollo almost to orbit before it too was dumped into the Atlantic. The last moments of the blast-off were reached as the third stage fired for a few short minutes and put Apollo into its course round the Earth. 2.5 hours went by as the astronauts prepared for TLI, Trans-Lunar Injection, the name for the moment when they restarted the great Saturn rocket engine to wrench Apollo out of its orbit and speed it off towards the moon. As TLI drew near, Rhett Turner of Voice of America reported from Cape Kennedy.
This is through Carnarvon, Australia. Astronaut Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins getting ready for trans-lunar injection for the burn. For the 5-minute burn, the second burn of the S-4B rocket, the thing which will add some 3,000 meters per second to their speed down over the Pacific Ocean and begin them swinging away from the Earth toward the moon. This comes at 2 hours, 44 minutes into the flight. Some 15 minutes from right now. I beg your pardon, 13 minutes from right now. Here at Cape Kennedy, everything is very, very quiet. We're all listening to those signals coming back from space through the Mission Control Center in Houston. The mission is progressing well. The spacecraft is now over the Australian continent, 2 hours and 30 minutes after liftoff. It just passed across Perth, Australia. It is now going across central Australia, and within the next 12 minutes, it will pass across just south of Townsville, out over the Pacific Ocean, and then the TLI burn will come south of the Gilbert Islands.
The burn came right on the button, and at a speed of something like 25,000 miles an hour, Apollo 11 was sent off to the moon. From inside the module, Neil Armstrong took a look at the view.
Well, we didn't have much time, Houston, to talk to you about our views out the window when we were preparing for LEM injection, but up to that time we had the entire northern part of the lighted hemisphere visible, including North America, North Atlantic, and Europe and Northern Africa. We could see that the weather was good just about everywhere. There was one cyclonic depression in northern Canada and the Athabasca, probably east of Athabasca area, Greenland was clear, and it appeared to be we were seeing just the ice cap in Greenland. All North Atlantic was pretty good, and Europe and Northern Africa seemed to be clear.
For 3 days, Apollo flew on. Its speed gradually dropped until it was down to a mere 2,000 miles an hour, when the moon's gravity began to exert its influence and speed it up. Near the moon, the spaceship's engines were fired in reverse to slow it down and get it into orbit. Just over 100 hours after blastoff, the voyage to the moon neared its climax. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin clambered into the lunar module Eagle. Michael Collins, now all alone 250,000 miles out in space, separated Eagle from the command ship Columbia. They orbited the moon together while final checks were made. Then early on the morning of Monday, July 21st, Eagle fired its tiny engines for PDI, Powered Descent Insertion, that last phase of the landing. In a long, slow curve, Eagle dropped towards the moon.
Go for landing, 3,000 feet. Time alarm.
3,000 feet comes the...
1201. 1201. Roger, 1201 alarm. Where go? Same type. Where go?
About to come.
2,000 feet. 2,000 feet.
Here
Into
comes,
the ag. 47 degrees. Roger. 47 degrees.
here comes the low gate, the landing phase, ending the approach
Eagle looking
phase.
great. Here go.
3,000 feet, 1,000 meters above the surface.
Altitude 1,600. 1,400 feet. Still looking very good.
From on board, they gave us...
Roger, 1202. We copy it. 35 degrees. 35 degrees. 750. Coming down to 23.
They can now see the landing
700 feet,
site.
21 down. 33 degrees.
700 feet,
100 feet down at 19.
about 150 meters.
540 feet down at 30. And at 15.
150 meters above the surface. The rate of descent, landing mode.
And 400 feet down at 9.
400 feet down at
Stay
9.
forward.
You're hearing Aldrin.
150 feet down at 10.
250 feet.
36 hands down.
That's Aldrin reporting status.
They're pegged on horizontal velocity. 300 feet down, 3.5. 27 forward.
100 meters above the lunar surface.
1.5 down.
About another minute until touchdown.
70. That's a shadow out there.
We've gone through low gate now.
50 down at 2.5.
50
18
feet,
forward. Altitude, velocity right.
about 20 meters above
8
the
hands
surface.
down. 220 feet.
Very
15
slow.
forward.
Vertical descent now, straight up and
11
down.
forward, come down nicely, 200 feet. 4.5 down. 5.5 down.
About half a minute.
6.5 down. 5.5 down. 9 forward.
Armstrong descending very, very slowly.
20 feet.
A vertical descent at this point.
100 feet. 3.5 down. 9 forward. 5%.
Another reading says 100
Right.
feet.
875 feet. That's looking good. Down a half.
That's about 25 meters from the surface. Beg your pardon.
60 seconds. Lights on.
That's Buzz Aldrin.
Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. 20 feet down 2.5. Picking up some dust.
Picking up some dust.
30 feet, 2.5 down.
10 meters.
Shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 6, down a half.
Moving to the right a little.
Forward, just. 8.
We should get it any moment.
Contact right.
Contact light.
Okay, engine stop.
Engine stop.
AJ at a descent. Post control, both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine
Touchdown.
arm off. 413 is in.
Eagle is on the move.
Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, 20.
Tranquility, we copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. These were the first words spoken from the surface of the moon. The lunar module was for the next few hours no longer Eagle, but Tranquility Base, named after the Sea of Tranquility, the area on the moon where they'd landed. Moments later, a message of congratulations with a certain old-world charm came up from Houston to the moon.
Tranquility, be advised there are lots of smiling faces in this room and all over the world. Over.
I'm sure that must be
There are
true.
two of them up here. Right, it was a beautiful job, you guys. And don't forget one in the command module. Right.
Two smiling faces up here. And Mike Collins pipes in, and don't forget one in the command module.
Michael Collins, now alone, listened in as from inside the module, his partners looked out the windows and told men on Earth what the moon looked like to men from Earth.
Houston, that may have seemed like a very long final phase. The auto-targeting was taking us right into a football field-sized crater with a large number of big boulders and rocks for about 1 or 2 crater diameters around it. And it required us down in T-66 and flying manually over the rock field to find a reasonably good area.
Roger, we copy. It was beautiful from here. Tranquility, over.
I'll get to the details of what's around here, but it looks like a collection of just about every variety of shape, angularity, granularity, every variety of rock you could find. The color is varies pretty much depending on how you're looking relative to the zero phase point. There doesn't appear to be too much of a general color at all. However, it looks as though some of the rocks and boulders, of which there are quite a few in the near area, looks as though they're going to have some interesting colors to them. Over.
Later, Neil Armstrong took another look from his window, this time at the heavens.
On the surface, we could not see any stars out the window, but at my overhead hatch, I'm looking at the Earth. It's big and bright, beautiful. I was going to get a try at seeing some stars through the optics.
Looking at the Earth out the overhead window.
We understand. Must be a beautiful sight, over.
The plan for the time on the moon was very clearly set out. Armstrong and Aldrin were to spend the first 2 hours checking Eagle's equipment. Then they had 35 minutes in which to eat. This was to be followed by 4 hours of rest, another hour for a meal, and a final 2 hours of preparation for the walk on the moon. That 4 hours of rest had been the subject of speculation and question for weeks. How could anyone, even men ice cool as these two, sit in the module for 4 hours when they were so close to their target? Extravehicular activity, it was called, EVA, the walk on the moon. When Neil Armstrong called Houston and asked if he could move EVA forward, the request was obviously expected.
Houston, Tranquility. Go, Tranquility, over.
Roger. Our recommendation at this point is planning an EVA with your concurrence starting at about 8 o'clock this evening Houston time. That is about 3 hours from now.
Stand by.
There's the request for an early EVA, for an early exit to the surface.
Tranquility Base, Houston, we thought about it. We will support it. We're go at that time, over.
That means that the step out onto the surface of the moon will come earlier than
You
planned.
guys are getting prime time TV there.
I hope that little TV set works, but we'll see.
Right.
Instead of...
Hello, Tranquility Base, Houston. Will your 8 o'clock Houston time reference to opening the hatch or starting the prep for EVA at that time, over?
At the hatch opening.
That's what we thought. Thank you much.
That might be a little later than that, but in other words, start the prep in about an hour or so.
Columbia,
by Columbia. Tranquility Base, Houston, that's fine. We're ready to support you anytime, Neil, over.
Stand by, Columbia. Wait your turn. Just like a taxi radio operator telling one of his cabs to hold on. So, much earlier than scheduled, Armstrong and Aldrin began the long preparation for their moonwalk. With them on the module was a piece of equipment called the Mesa, modularized equipment storage assembly. A kind of box which carried a TV camera, a scoop for collecting rocks and loose surface material, hammers and tongs, a stereo camera, and 2 aluminium boxes which were to hold the rocks they picked up. These boxes were made of pieces of solid aluminium bored out. To make them of sheets of aluminium soldered together would have made them too heavy because of the weight of the solder. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin completed their checking. 39-year-old Armstrong was about to become the first man to set foot on the moon. Shortly before 1 o'clock on the afternoon of Monday, July 21st, Eastern Australian time, Armstrong opened the hatch of the lunar module. Slowly he eased himself down the short ladder which he had lowered to the surface. The world listened and watched as his partner Buzz Aldrin directed him.
Okay, can you pull the door open a little more?
Buzz says everything's nice in here. Neil says, okay, could you hold the door open just a little more?
Did you get the Mesa now? I'm going to pull it now.
Here goes the Mesa. He's going to pull the lanyard. And when he does this, the television camera should pop open.
The Mesa came down, all right.
And within minutes or within seconds, we should
Roger, we copy, and we're standing by for your TV.
We'll see if the television comes in, and hopefully the rest of you in the world may see this with us. Neil Armstrong standing on the porch, the platform of the lunar module. This TV camera.
This is Neil, radio check. Neil, this is Houston, loud and clear. Break. Buzz, this is Houston, radio check and verify TV circuit breaker in.
Verify.
TV circuit breaker's in.
Buzz saying he's got the TV circuit breaker turning on the camera.
Roger.
Here we go. Now we can see a picture
on the
from
TV.
Picture of the TV.
And we got a good picture, huh? There's a great deal of contrast in it, and currently it's upside down on our monitor, but we can make out a fair amount of detail.
You're the first live pictures from the surface of the moon. We can see some movement there.
Okay, would you verify the position, the opening I ought to have on the camera?
It's upside down. They've had to turn it around. They've had to reverse the picture. Neil has stepped down. He's now down on the foot pad. Armstrong's foot is on the foot pad.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
It's very dark.
Okay, I just checked, getting back up to that first step. It's not even collapsed too far, but it's adequate to get back up. Roger, we copy. Pretty good slow jump.
He wants to check how hard it is to get back up to that first step. It's quite a reach. He has a foot down on the foot pad. We can't tell if he stepped off onto the
Buzz, this is Houston. F2, I'm at the 1/160th second for shadow photography on the sequence camera.
It's a silhouetted picture.
At the foot of the ladder, the lamb footpads are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches, although the surface appears to be very, very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder down there. It's very fine.
Armstrong is standing on the foot pad. We can see him moving around now. He is undoubtedly.
I'm going to step off the lamb now.
He's stepping off. He has put his left foot off on the surface of the moon. Man is on the moon.
Small step for man. One giant leap for mankind.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. With a definite note of urgency in his voice this time, Neil Armstrong reported to Earth on his sensations.
Surface is fine and powdery. I can pick it up loosely with my toe, it does adhere in fine layers, like powdered charcoal, to the sole and sides of my boot. I only go in a fraction of an inch, maybe an eighth of an inch, but I can see the footprints of my boots and the treads and the fine sandy particles. Yeah, this is Houston. We're copying.
Armstrong said that the surface of the moon was fine and powdery. He is holding on with one hand at all times to the... Now he's just turned loose. He's walking around now.
There seems to be no difficulty in moving around as we suspected. It's even perhaps easier than the simulations of 16G that we performed in various simulations on the ground. Absolutely no trouble to walk around.
We can easily see him moving around right near the footpad and the ladder. He's staying just within a few meters.
This engine did not leave a crater of any size. It has about 1 foot clearance on the ground. We're essentially on a very level place here. I can see some evidence of rays emanating from the descent engine, but very insignificant amount.
For 25 minutes, Armstrong prodded and stepped gingerly round the moon's surface, absolutely alone. Aldrin remained inside the module, taking pictures of his colleague at work. Armstrong scooped up the first samples of moon dust and stuffed them in the pockets of his elaborate spacesuit. Then Aldrin joined him and cracked the first moon joke.
I want to back up and partially close the hatch. Making sure not to lock it on my way out. Particularly good thought. That's our home for the next couple hours. We want to take good care of it. Okay, I'm on the top step and I can look down over the RCU and landing gear pad. It's a very simple matter to hop down from one step to the next. Yes, I found it to be very comfortable, and walking is also very comfortable.
Armstrong and Aldrin had carried with them a number of items which were to remain behind them when they left the moon. Most of them were technical: a seismic device to allow scientists back on Earth to watch for any impacts on the moon's surface. There was also a wind measuring device and an American flag. And they unveiled a plaque, a typical gesture for Earthmen, and Neil Armstrong read what was written on it.
For those who haven't read the plaque, we'll read the plaque that's on the front landing gear of this limb. There's 2 hemispheres, one showing each of the 2 hemispheres of Earth. Underneath it says, "Dear men from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, July 1969, with ease. It came in peace for all mankind." It has the crew members' signatures and signature of the President of the United States.
Soon after the moonwalk began, Armstrong and Aldrin stood to attention to take the most remarkable telephone call in history. From the White House, President Nixon spoke to them.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House. And this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made. I just can't tell you how proud we all are of what you do. For every American, this has to be the proudest day of our lives. And for people all over the world, I am sure they too join with us in recognizing what an immense feat this is. Because of what you have done, the heavens have become a part of man's world. And as you talk to us from the sea of tranquility, it inspires us to redouble our efforts to bring peace and tranquility to Earth. For one priceless moment in the whole history of man, all the people on this earth are truly one. One in their pride in what you have done, and one in our prayers that you will return safely to earth.
Normally ice-cold, unemotional, taciturn, Armstrong sounded deeply moved as he replied,
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a great honor and privilege for us to be here representing not only the United States, but men of peaceable nations, and with interest and a curiosity and with a vision for the future. Honor for us to be able to participate here today.
The phone call done, the two men set about their task. Aldrin demonstrated a kind of kangaroo hop, but generally they worked methodically, going about the duties assigned to them. Armstrong described the moon's surface again, giving a more detailed report than his first messages.
It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like in the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here.
Has a beauty all its own.
Be advised that a lot of the rock samples out here, the hard rock samples, have what appear to be vesicles in the surface.
Vesicles in the surface of the rocks.
Also, I'm looking at one now that appears to have some sort of phoenixes.
I'm looking at one rock which seems to have some sort of, I thought he said vein-like texture.
Okay, the handle is out.
Buzz Aldrin is reporting that the handle is...
This has been about 6 to 8 inches into the surface.
He's describing...
It is. I'm sure I could push it in further, but it's hard for me to bend down further than that.
For 2¼ hours they worked, while high above them the lonely Michael Collins swept round and round the moon in the command ship Columbia. At last they returned to the module Tranquility Base. Back inside, Armstrong and Aldrin prepared to go to sleep. The module was hardly a home. Armstrong curled up on the engine cover and Aldrin went to sleep on the floor. Before they began this rest, which was to last 6 hours, the ground controller at Houston wished them good night.
Any question to get ready to turn in, go back into caution and warning enable. And we'd like to say from all of us down here in Houston, and really from all of us in all the countries and in the entire world, we think that you've done a magnificent job up there today. Over. Thank you very much. It's been a long day.
21 hours and 36 minutes after their landing, Armstrong and Aldrin readied themselves for another of the incredible hazards of their flight, the blast off from the surface of the moon. Because of the moon's low gravitational pull, the amount of thrust needed for the liftoff was only 1/6 of what would have been needed for the same endeavor on Earth. But like the moon landing and the moonwalk, it had never been done before.
7, 6, 5, hoist stage, engine arm active, proceed. Liftoff. 26, 36 feet per second out. Moving. Little pitch over.
Pitching over.
Very smooth.
Very smooth, says Buzz Aldrin.
Balance couple off.
Balance couple off, I believe. Is that...
Very quiet ride.
Very quiet ride.
Down there.
They're standing up inside the lunar module, lifting off the surface of the moon.
1,000 feet high, 80 feet per second vertical rise.
Once again, everything had gone perfectly. The module, no longer Tranquility Base, but back to its old name of Eagle, moved aloft quite slowly. 250 feet up, Eagle pitched over and headed higher until it went into orbit. The command ship Columbia at this time was about 260 miles out in front. Gradually, the two craft were brought closer and closer together. 3½ hours after the liftoff, Eagle and Columbia redocked, and Armstrong and Aldrin clambered back in with Collins, who had flown alone for 27 hours. They were so eager to get back and so reticent about what they were doing that Houston Ground Control didn't know for some minutes that the maneuver had been completed successfully. These astronauts were the most untalkative American space crew on record. They wouldn't volunteer small talk, so Houston had to ask for it and got it from Mike Collins.
How's it feel up there to have some company? Damn good, I'll tell you. I bet you almost be talking to yourself up there after 10 revs or so. No, it's a happy home up here. It'd be nice to have some company. Matter of fact, it'd be nice to have a couple 100 million Americans up here. Right, well, they were with you in spirit. See what they're getting for their money. Right, they were with you in spirit anyway, at least that many.
The three men prepared for TEI, trans-Earth injection, the firing of the engines which would take them out of the moon's orbit and send them on their way back to Earth. First they jettisoned Eagle, the lunar module, whose job was now over. Then just before 3 o'clock on the afternoon of Tuesday, July 22nd, Australian Eastern Time, the engines were started and Apollo 11 headed for home.
Apollo 11, Houston, how did it go, over?
It's Charlie Duke making a call to Apollo 11.
I'll open up the LRL doors, Charlie. Roger, we got you coming home.
Open up the LRL doors. That sounded like Neil Armstrong.
Okay, first day. Delta Big was 0. First time was 2.30. They had the angle, Delta ATX. After trim was 0.1. DGY 0.9. BGC 0.1. Delta BC minus 17.9er. Roger, copy, Neil. Sounds good. Apollo 11, Houston, all your systems look real good to us. We'll keep you posted.
True to his fashion, Armstrong kept it short and sweet when he proclaimed to the ground communicator, the fellow astronaut Charlie Duke, that all was well.
See you, Charlie boy, looking good here. That was a beautiful bird. They don't come any finer. Roger.
Now the long journey back to Earth began. There was still danger ahead, for there's always the possibility that a meteorite could wipe out the spaceship, something could go wrong at re-entry, or, after splashdown, if the weather was bad, the men could even be lost. But the real dangers lay behind, and so Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins went to sleep.
This is Apollo Control at 137 hours, 52 minutes. The Apollo 11 crew has signed off for the night, starting a long, well-deserved rest period. The duration of the rest period is programmed for 10 hours. However, the wake-up time is not critical. It's very likely we'll let them sleep till they wake up of their own accord.
One last word had to be said for Eagle, the fragile machine which man had designed so he could go to the moon.
This is Apollo Control. 10 minutes ago, we logged what we expect to be our last contact with Eagle in lunar orbit. That coming at 137 hours, 55 minutes elapsed time. At that time, the battery power fell below the level where the secondary guidance system could hold the attitude of the vehicle within the steerable antenna limits. We do not expect to establish contact with Eagle again.
The hours went by. Apollo was moving much faster on the return journey than on the outward run, for the moon's gravitational pull was so weak, and the closer they got to home, the stronger the pull from Earth became. Somebody somewhere decided the return journey was too routine. So, with 2 days still to go, Mission Control was suddenly startled to hear the laconic voice of the mission controller asked Apollo if it had an explanation.
Apollo 11, Houston, you sure you don't have anybody else in there with you? Houston, Apollo 11, say again, please. We had some strange noises coming down on the downlink, and sounded like you had some friends up there.
The crew on board acknowledged they could hear the sounds too, but said they had no explanation. They signed off, and the voices had the last word. Cartoonists the world over had a field day with those noises, later accepted as an accidental mix-up of sound from an open circuit in the spaceship. The astronauts were in a light mood, however, and Michael Collins took over as chief actor. With a teaspoon and some water, he demonstrated how the three men were living in a weightless atmosphere.
Houston, this next is a little demonstration for the kids at home, all kids everywhere for that matter. I was going to show you how you drink water out of a spoon, but I'm afraid I filled the spoon too full, and If I'm not careful, I'm going to spill water right over the sides. Can you see the water slopping around on the top of this phone case? That's primitive 11. Okay, well, as I say, I was going to show you, but I'm afraid I filled it too full and it's going to spill over the side. I tell you what, I'll just turn this one over and get rid of the water and start all over again, okay?
Building up more and more speed, Apollo 11 raced towards splashdown. It was doing nearly 25,000 miles an hour when it hit the Earth's atmosphere. All that was left of Apollo now was the command module. The long cylindrical service module had been separated only moments before the re-entry. The command module had then turned around so that its wide, flat bottom would take the tremendous heat built up by re-entry. The heat shield's temperature hit 5,000 degrees. The three men were subjected to a gravitational force of 6 Gs. They became, in fact, 6 times heavier than normal. Or, for Armstrong and Aldrin, they were 36 times heavier than they'd been on the moon. From past experience, it was known that the enormous forces at work after initial re-entry would mean a total blackout of communication between the ground controllers and the spaceship for a period of 3 minutes. Voice of America's Rhett Turner was in mission control as the moment grew closer.
3 minutes to entry, says mission control. About another 1,000 kilometers per hour speed to be added before the atmosphere starts to slow them down.
With Apollo 11 in the proper attitude, and 11 Houston, we'll have you for about 3 more minutes through Redstone and then pick you up after blackout through the line.
There was mention of the tracking ship Redstone. It's the Redstone that's down in that area now. Then Araya aircraft. These are range instrumented aircraft which are flying all over that area out the Pacific to fill in any communication gaps which may...
Apollo 11 lined up right down the middle of the entry corridor. Velocity is now 35,578 feet per second.
Continuing to pick up speed. That's just about the maximum. That's just about the maximum speed expected, 39,000 kilometers per hour.
We're a minute and 45 seconds from entry. Blackout will begin 18 seconds after entry.
18 seconds after hitting that 120 kilometer altitude, 120,000 meters. The thing which causes the blackout is a gas and electronic plasma condition which builds up due to heat.
Houston, Apollo 11, I'm going to go to command reset and turn the tape on.
Out. That was Buzz Aldrin. Aldrin.
11 Houston, recommend negative on that. That'll put us in low bit rate.
We're still having problems with our radio and television communications with the USA.
Okay, I already put it to command reset, but I still have barber pole on the tape.
Has barber pole on the tape. That means
my switch is high bit rate.
Okay, that'll be fine.
Barber pole on the tape.
225 there, if you can reach it, Buzz.
Barber pole on the tape means that a flag is showing which indicates something's not operating properly.
36,000 feet per second.
30 seconds until entry begins.
And 11 Houston, don't mess around with that 225 there.
Beginning to come down now. 18 seconds. 15. Splash down 14 minutes away.
And 11 Houston, you're going over the hill there shortly. You're looking mighty fine to us.
See you later.
Should be hitting entry right now.
Good entry time. Blackout very shortly.
About 20 seconds away.
Range to go to splash, 1,533 nautical miles. There's blackout.
There's blackout right on schedule.
Down it came into the Pacific Ocean. Bad weather had caused a late change in the target, but Apollo's splashdown was only 1.7 miles off that line. It hit the water just 9 miles away from the main recovery ship, aircraft carrier Hornet, which now carried, among a host of others, President Nixon. Helicopters were ready, and in quick time Apollo was located. Frogmen jumped into the water beside the craft, and a raft was partially filled with antiseptic. needed in case the crewmen had brought back from the moon some organisms which could contaminate Earth's atmosphere. For the same reason, when Apollo's hatch was first opened, a frogman threw in 3 bits of clothing called BIGs, biological isolation garments. These were all-enveloping suits which the astronauts donned inside the spacecraft before they emerged into the antiseptic raft. There they scrubbed each other down, the frogmen too, in case any organism lingered on. In a little more than an hour, though, they were stepping out of a helicopter onto the deck of the Hornet, a scene described by Voice of America's Don Blair.
Pattering down on this deck right now. Here they come. Don Jones has picked up astronauts number 4, 5, and 6. He picked up Borman, Lovell, and Anders at Christmas time. Now he has the moon astronauts in helicopter number 66. Listen to those blades. They're on the deck. Recovery complete. Recovery complete. Shut down. That's the word. Recovery complete. Shut down. Sitting in the back, in marked contrast, are the idle Marine helicopters which brought the President and his party on board this morning.
The copter stopped and the 3 men stepped out, walked across the deck into a special trailer, completely sealed off to the outside world. This marked the start of 18 days quarantine in which the astronauts would be watched like hawks for any sign of illness and to ensure that they could in no way cause contamination. Outside the trailer stood President Nixon, and with the 3 astronauts clustered round the small window where he could see them, he spoke to them over a microphone.
Neil, Buzz, and Mike, I want you to know that I think I'm the luckiest man in the world. And I say this not only because I have the honor to be President of the United States, but particularly because I have the privilege of speaking for so many and welcoming you back to Earth. I could tell you about all the messages we've received in Washington. Over 100 foreign governments, emperors and presidents and prime ministers and kings have sent the most warm messages that we've ever received. They represent over 2 billion people on this earth, all of them who have had the opportunity through television to see what you have done. And then I also bring you messages from members of the cabinet and members of the Senate and members of the House and the Space Agency, from the streets of San Francisco, where people stopped me a few days ago, and you all love that city, I know, as I do. But most important, I had a telephone call yesterday. The toll wasn't, incidentally, as great as the one I made to you fellows on the moon. I made that collect, incidentally, in case you didn't know. But I called 3 of, in my view, 3 of the greatest ladies and most courageous ladies in the whole world today, your wives. And from Jan and Joan and Pat, I bring their love and their congratulations. We think it's just wonderful that they could have participated, at least through television, in this return. We're only sorry they couldn't be here. And also, I've got to let you in a little secret. I made a date with them. I invited them to dinner on the 13th of August, right after you come out of quarantine. It will be a state dinner held in Los Angeles. The governors of all the 50 states will be there, the ambassadors, others from around the world and in America. And they told me that you would come too. And all I want to know, will you come? We want to honor you then.
We'll do anything you say, Mr. President. Anytime.
One question I think that all of us would like to ask, as we saw you bouncing around in that boat out there, I wonder if that wasn't the hardest part of the journey. Was that the only, did any of you get seasick?
No, we didn't, and it was one of the harder parts, but it was one of the most pleasant, we can assure you.
Yeah. Well, I just know that you can sense what we all sense. Gee, you look great. You feel as good as you look.
Feel great. Feel just perfect, Mr. President.
Yeah. I understand Frank Borman says you're a little younger by reason of having going into space. Is that right? Do you feel that way, a little younger?
We're a lot younger than Frank Borman.
There he is over there. Come on over, Frank, so they can see you. And You going to take that lying down?
It looks like he has aged in the last couple of weeks.
Come on, Frank.
Mr. President, the one thing I want is, we have a poet in Mike Collins, and he really gave me a hard time for describing your words fantastic and beautiful. And I counted them. In 3 minutes up there, you used 4 fantastics and 2 beautiful.
Well, just let me close off with this one thing. I was thinking, as you know, as you came down, and we knew it was a success, and it had only been 8 days, just a week, a long week, that this is the greatest week in the history of the world since the creation. Because as a result of what happened in this week, the world is bigger infinitely. And also, as I'm going to find on this trip around the world, and as Secretary Rogers will find that he covers the other countries in Asia, as a result of what you've done, the world's never been closer together before. And we just thank you for that. And I only hope that all of us in government, all of us in America, that as a result of what you've done, we can do our job a little better. We can reach for the stars just as you have reached so far from the stars. We don't want to hold you any longer. Anybody have a last word? How about promotions? Do you think we could arrange something?
We're just pleased to be back and very honored that you were so kind as to come out here and welcome us back. And we look forward to getting out of this quarantine and talking without having glass between us.
Right. And incidentally, the speeches that you have to make at this dinner can be very short. And if you want to say fantastic or beautiful, that's all right with us.
Mr. Nixon then called on the ship's chaplain to offer a prayer of thanksgiving for the astronaut's safe return to Earth.
Let us pray. Lord God, our Heavenly Father, our minds are staggered and our spirits exultant with the magnitude and precision of this entire Apollo 11 mission. We have spent the past week in communal anxiety and hope as our astronauts sped through the glories and dangers of the heavens. As we try to understand and analyze the scope of this achievement for human life, our reason is overwhelmed with abounding gratitude and joy, even as we realize the increasing challenges of the future. This magnificent event illustrates anew what man can accomplish when purpose is firm and intent corporate. A man on the moon was promised in this decade, and though some were unconvinced, the reality is with us this morning in the persons of astronauts Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. We applaud their splendid exploits, and we pour out our thanksgiving for their safe return to us, to their families, to all mankind. From our inmost beings, we sing humble yet exuberant praise. May the great effort and commitment seen in this Project Apollo inspire our lives to move similarly in other areas of need. May we, the people, by our enthusiasm and devotion and insight, move to new landings in brotherhood, human concern, and mutual respect. May our country, afire with inventive leadership and backed by a committed followership, blaze new trails into all areas of human care. See our enthusiasm and bless our joy with dedicated purpose toward the many needs at hand. Link us in friendship with peoples throughout the world as we strive together to better the human condition. Grant us peace, beginning in our own hearts, and a mind attuned with goodwill towards our neighbor. All this we pray as our thanksgiving rings out to Thee, in the name of our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
It was 8 years and 2 months since President Kennedy had set his goal.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Even as that goal had been reached, 2 other American spaceships, unmanned, were nearing the planet Mars after traveling 61 million miles and for more than 5 months. They took photographs as they flew by less than 2,000 miles from its surface. How long would it be before another crew of astronauts would land on that surface? how long would it be before another president would say,
This is the greatest week in the history of the world since the creation.